I have been thinking about the Max Payne live-action film from 2008, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, since the first two games are getting a modern remake. But you know what really needs a remake? The film. I love a gritty neo-noir with a protagonist all set for revenge, but the adaptation was way too unfaithful. Colossal changes, colossal disaster. I'm sorry, but I had to say it. No one expected a film with backing from 20th Century Fox to mess up that bad, but shit happens. And the adaptation completely watered down everything that made the original games and its storyline so captivating and immersive. And it all began with a simple mistake. Sidelining Remedy Entertainment, the company responsible for Max Payne. What could have been a great franchise became a scrapped project after the release of a film that did decent at the box office, but was brutally picked apart by fans and critics alike. So, let's talk about what happened to the Max Payne movie. The director rewrote everything, and nobody asked Remedy. The third-person shooter video game that is Max Payne was all set to get its own live-action adaptation since 2001 itself. Collision Entertainment took the project to 20th Century Fox in 2005, and Bo Thorne concocted the script in 2007. John Moore was handed the baton of the director, and Mark Wahlberg was all set to play Max Payne. But the original script was loyal to the storyline of the game. Unfortunately, the final product is simply a loose adaptation. And as it goes with almost every loose adaptation, it did not go well with the viewers or the critics. This is where the switch from Sean Ryan as the writer to Bo Thorne, and the decision to keep Remedy Entertainment at an arm's length, became the bane of the Max Payne live-action film. I understand that a live-action cannot get a super loyal adaptation because what works in a video game or anything animated or a fantasy novel does not always work in a live-action setting. But the damage can generally be softened by working alongside the original creator. The only exception would be Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, where Tolkien was not too involved, and yet the films did well. But anyway, the situation came to a point where Remedy and its creative director Sam Lake had to follow the development of the Max Payne film from movie sites, much like how the audience had to, which is iffy. One of the key changes that became a primary culprit would be the addition of Max Payne's backstory in the middle of the film. As you may know, the story of Max Payne kicks off with Max losing his wife, Michelle, and infant daughter Rose to a terrible murder. This sets him off on a path of revenge as he grows hell-bent on finding the killer and avenging his family. Quite the Punisher of him. The video game opens with this and sets off the tone of the storyline. We know why Max does what he does. We have the early emotional connection to his desire for vengeance. The film does not open with this, however. Instead, we get the origin somewhere in the middle of the film, and game producer Scott Miller has been very vocal about his grievance towards this choice in particular, among others. He claimed that the flaws of the story had him shaking his head in bewilderment. Due to his love and passion for Max Payne, however, he has always wanted Hollywood to give it another go, this time properly and with the developers of the game and Remedy Entertainment in tow. More so because it was Max Payne that put Remedy on the map. The critical reception doubled down on this, with Rotten Tomatoes mentioning how the plot for the film comes off as something that is illogical, while the film itself is over-directed, and a 15% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes is bad. Metacritic did not go light with its rating either, as Max Payne was given an average score of 31 out of 100. Mark Wahlberg was renowned for his hard-bitten roles, but his performance as Max Payne did not live up to his own standards. Jim Vejvoda from IGN criticized Wahlberg's drab performance and claimed that the rest of the cast doesn't fare much better. The film, however, had a #1 opening weekend, which prompted Scott Miller to retract his harsh comments. He instead claimed to be proud of the film and expressed his hopes for a sequel. Other positive comments were from the critic Armand White, who claimed how Moore explored the genuine contemporary anxiety with images richer than the plot of the film. Max Payne even bagged the award for IGN's Best Video Game Adaptation, but the crown here was not of gold. Instead, IGN quoted, "This is how sad games to film have become, that the only one worthy of being named the best of the year is a movie that we panned." Another reason the script earned its dud reputation? The game was already slated for a live-action adaptation before its release, and unfortunately for Bo Thorne, this was his first and last produced screenplay. Fox wanted PG-13, and the movie paid for it. Action movies are always violent, but Max Payne getting an R rating by the MPAA was pushing it. John Moore was furious about it. The Dark Knight, which in itself was dark but not any less dark than Max Payne, had a PG-13 rating. 20th Century Fox wanted the film to get a PG-13 rating in the first place, and as such, Max Payne was developed accordingly, even though the original video game is mature. Yes, there was some gore, such as images of bloody wounded squibs on the floor and blood that had squirted out from the nose, strong language here and there, shooting sequences, minor sexual scenes, and drug content were part of the bandwagon, but it was nothing extreme. Moore said that the MPAA changes their rules willy-nilly, and it depends on who's seeing your actual movie at the time. It's very difficult to get a hold of what's acceptable. It's a given that a PG-13 action film will have more motion than an R-rated one, since a huge percentage of the population who have enjoyed the games are older teens in high school. When that audience cannot go for the film, you're essentially gatekeeping a demographic that actually wants to see the film and instead limiting yourself to those who either played the game as adults or were teens back in 2001 and have now become adults. This entire deal led to Moore trimming and editing the frames by removing bits of gore, ultimately watering down the violence to a point where the MPAA changed the rating to PG-13. Fortunately, no major changes had to be made. Mila Kunis, who played the Russian mobster Mona Sachs, claimed that the only difference between the R-rated and PG-13 versions was the lack of blood, but John Moore did not take away the dark and somber atmosphere from the film. However, two versions of the most action-heavy sequences, that is, the shootout at the Aesir SWAT building and Max Payne's attack on the building, were filmed in two versions. One version had blood squibs and the other did not. Moore even called the shooting of Payne's attack on Aesir to be the bloodiest thing he had ever shot, but having access to two versions of the sequences allowed Moore to quickly change things and get the necessary PG-13 rating in the United States. The United Kingdom classified the film for those who are 15 and above due to its strong violence. Also, another of the film's biggest sins? Just 3 measly slow-motion sequences. This is especially crazy since the original game invented the bullet time mechanic. The box office looked fine, so why did the sequel die? As mentioned, Max Payne did well at the box office with the first weekend alone, grossing almost $18 million despite going against heavy hitters such as The Secret Life of Bees, Sex Drive, and W starring Josh Brolin. Domestically, Max Payne grossed a total of $40 million, while overseas the numbers touched almost $45 million. Yes, $85 million is not an overwhelming success, but it is also not a total disaster, at least when considered with the production's cost, which was $35 million. Other video game adaptations such as Silent Hill, Hitman, and Resident Evil grossed within the same range, at least in the United States, but they had pulled higher numbers at the overseas box office. The film ended with Max and Mona meeting, as part of the post-credits scene after they learned about Nicole Horn still being alive, which gave them a new purpose. This set up a possible sequel which Fox always wanted, but despite the box office numbers, Max Payne fell victim to harsh criticism from professionals and fans alike. To make matters worse, the fan community for the video game was greatly disappointed by the film, which contributed to the negative reception around it. This ultimately led to the previously intended sequel being dropped. Had the fans at least wanted a part 2, we might have gotten a sequel, but films are for the people. If the people don't want a sequel to a film, it does not make sense for production to run with it. Doing so would have just been a terrible business decision. Fox lucked out at the box office simply because people wanted to see Max Payne. With knowledge of how it was not a faithful adaptation, fans were unlikely to have the same hype for a possible sequel. They were also less likely to show up, and Remedy Entertainment itself did not want a sequel. Sam Lake himself mentioned in an interview with Game Reformer that if they had been involved in the development and production, they would have had some solutions. But there is no going back now, especially due to Max Payne losing its footing from the third game onwards. At some point, the writer and director, Leroy Kincaid, worked on a fan-made film known as Max Payne Retribution, which unironically did better with the critics than 20th Century Fox's film. But the worst thing here has to be that of Razzie nominating Wahlberg for Worst Actor. The game creators are still fuming, and they think they can fix it. You know how sometimes young people are in a very bad relationship with someone who is by all means hopeless, but they go through the "but I can fix them" phase? This is kind of the relationship the creative developers of Max Payne the video game had with the live-action film. This has led us to Scott Miller's tweet, which did rounds across Twitter as he said, and I quote, "The story had changed dramatically from the original script we sold to Fox. The issue was that the film's director revised the script such that it no longer resembled the game's story." He also mentioned how everyone around him knew that the film was a disaster. He eventually emailed the studio with multiple key things that they did not adapt or did not adapt properly for the film. I will briefly go over some of the key differences. There is the obvious one where the origin of Max Payne was pushed to the middle of the film. As per Miller, this created a situation where the audience did not understand why Max was seeking revenge in the first place. As it stands, not everyone watching a film is someone well-versed with the source material. I mean, so many people watched Project Hail Mary without reading the book. I myself read it after I watched it. And while Project Hail Mary is a fantastic film, Max Payne is from 2008, and during this time, Netflix existed, but streaming was not everything. A lot of people were randomly watching random films on random days just for the heck of it. They'd need to know why Max is doing what he is doing. Then there is the part where one of the main antagonists of the story, Jack Lupino, dies because he is killed by B.B. Hensley, a former cop, an ex-partner of Payne's dad who was head of security in Aesir, and the man behind Michelle Payne's murder. He did it while Max fought Lupino and was on the verge of being defeated. In the game, however, it was Max who killed Lupino, which was more satisfying as Lupino had gained the upper hand. On the topic of BB, he was made to be the one responsible for trafficking the drug Valkyr, which either made you superhuman or gave you intense hallucinations. Originally, he was just someone who betrayed Max and died during the parking garage shootout sequence. The film had Max shooting BB on top of the helipad, whereas the end scene should have been of Max killing Nicole Horn by shooting out the guy wires of the lightning rods atop a tower and dropping it on her helicopter. The worst one for me was how Max found out about Michelle's death. It should have been this super intriguing sequence where Max would discover an old laboratory under the government which is responsible for producing Valkyr, and then discovering how and why Michelle and Rose were killed. Instead, the film cuts it out and Max learns about the death of his family via BB himself. Another odd alteration was that of the Valkyries being demonic creatures, which does not make sense. In Norse mythology, Valkyries are female warriors. Where did demons come from? Also, why is the film so supernatural heavy? The hallucinations are not clear-cut. Max even takes the Valkyr in the film to prevent himself from getting hypothermia as he had jumped into the water, which is just so bland. In the game, Nicole Horn forced him to take the drug at gunpoint because he had found out about her involvement with the mafia boss Angelo Punchinello. Overall, Sam Lake has explicitly mentioned that it is the lack of his involvement that has caused the Max Payne film to fail, more so because he is experienced in this field. He has literally been the man responsible for the creation of the Remedy-connected universe, as he and his team have adapted several video games. If there is someone who can nail the atmosphere, tone, and narrative of the show, it is him. In fact, Rockstar Games directly consulted him while developing Max Payne 3. Lake was initially happy about Max Payne getting a film, but he also claimed that he felt a sense of detachment due to how Remedy was not involved in the project. As such, people find it crazy that John Moore did not consult Sam Lake or Remedy while developing Max Payne. Like, I get it. Filmmakers want to do their own thing, but damn, when will we settle the fact that for live-action adaptations of popular games, you need to consult the original creators? Some claim the culprit has to be filmmakers seeing video games as a lesser form of art. Currently, the remakes of Max Payne 1 and 2 are entering production, so fans hope for the return of Sam Lake as Max Payne. And with Remedy returning to the film industry, there is hope for another, more faithful Max Payne adaptation on the big screen. I spent years thinking of the Max Payne films as a cautionary tale of what could have been, but now I can see the silver lining. Maybe there is hope? Might we get a remake? Scott Miller said it first, you know. And with that, this video comes to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Till then, thanks, and have a great day.